Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to our colleagues in Brussels and elsewhere. And thank you for joining us in this new edition of MEI's Defense Leadership Series, which we're honored to hold with Giovanni Romani, NATO's top official on the Middle East. My name is Bilal Saab. I'm a senior fellow and the director of the Defense and Security Program at the Middle East Institute. I'm also an adjunct professor with Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service in the Security Studies program. And just this spring coming up, I'll be teaching a new course on U.S. defense policy in the Middle East. So please make sure to sign up, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you on campus. This is episode number 15 of the series, and the main reason why we created this platform was to initiate a dialogue with some of the world's most prominent defense thinkers and practitioners. And we inaugurated the series back in June of 2020. With a conversation with Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie, the current CENTCOM commander. Today we have the privilege of talking to a friend from across the Atlantic, working for an organization that, despite what was said in recent years, still matters a great deal to the United States, and to European security and also to international security. And that, of course, is NATO. Giovanni Romani heads the Middle East and North Africa section at NATO. He served in the Italian Navy for more than 20 years, specializing in telecommunications, combat operations, electronic warfare, and intelligence, and retiring from the service in 2006 as the executive officer, second in command of the Italian Navy destroyer, Francesco Membelli. I would invite you to check out Giovanni's impressive background and full bio on either NATO's or MEI's website. Giovanni, it really is a treat to have you with us, my friend. Thank you for agreeing to do this. And we extend our thanks to NATO for this opportunity to engage with you personally. Before we start, anything you'd like to share with us about you? Tell us where you're from in Italy and what do you like to do in your free time?
Good afternoon from Brussels. I know it's morning there. A little bit about myself. I was born in Siena, in Tuscany. I grew up in Liguria, anyhow. My dad was a Navy officer as well. And I've been living in Brussels now for a while, over 15 years. And I have two little kids that burn a lot of my time. And whenever I can, I play some tennis. That's what I can tell you about me. Yes. Sure. And looking forward to this engagement.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for agreeing to do this once again. So typically we'll spend an hour or so, Giovanni, with our guests. And I have a set of questions that are, I'm warning you, not very easy. And it's a very interesting time right now with the new administration in Washington, obviously, ideally new engagements with NATO, whether it's in the Middle East or elsewhere. So let me start with the first one, which is a big picture to set the scene strategically, at least. Just to help us understand what NATO's top priorities are at the moment and tell us how those will be affecting, in your opinion, your posture and your investments in the Middle East, because at the end of the day, this is a conversation about the Middle East.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Let's start from more general kind of concepts, as we live in a world that is changing faster than ever before. And with geopolitical shifts, technological advances are transforming our security landscape. And there's a widening array of security threats and challenges, from nuclear proliferation to hostile cyber activities, disinformation campaigns, climate disruptions. When you're looking at NATO's southern neighborhood, we can add conflict spillover from fragile or failing states. It's the case of Syria, Libya, Yemen, instability and terrorism in the Sahel and Iraq, transitional terrorist groups such as Daesh and Al-Qaeda, arms trafficking, and so on and so forth. And not to forget the ongoing threat of Russian military and the hybrid activities and the new challenges posed by the rise of China. The last 2 years have definitely been transformative, also due to the impact of COVID-19, and they've really been years of change. All these have compelled NATO allies and countries around the world to reassess their defense and security strategies. And NATO is adapting once more in its over 70 years to be ready to deal with any threat at any time. So going to the priorities, there are essentially three that we pose to ourselves: to keep NATO strong militarily, to make it stronger politically, and to ensure it takes an even more comprehensive approach, one that is forward-leaning. The aim is to look to the future and make our alliance even stronger so that NATO can continue to protect our almost 1 billion citizens in the coming decade and far beyond. This is why the alliance is currently adapting its strategic concept to reflect these changes and priorities. And as you might have heard, the new strategic concept will be presented at the summit, which has recently been announced, will be Madrid in June 2022. Our military is already strong, and we must invest more in the capabilities we need to deter our potential adversaries and to defend ourselves in the five domains, which are land, sea, air, and more recently also the cyber domain and space. We need the best military, and we need the right equipment. This means that we also have to keep our technological edge and remain at the forefront of innovation. And NATO's ability to innovate is what has guaranteed our military superiority for the past 7 decades. But other nations, including Russia and China, are developing new technologies, from hypersonic missiles to autonomous systems, AI, and cyber warfare. And China in particular is becoming a global leader in the development of disruptive technologies. Let me just mention two: facial recognition and quantum computing. They are not inherently bad, but the way they're deployed could have an impact on our security and our freedom, so that we need to remain vigilant. And to make the alliance stronger politically, we need to bring all the issues that affect our security to NATO's table, even if sometimes these discussions can be difficult. Ultimately, decisions resulting from frank exchanges are more lasting and are stronger. And the spillover effects of conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa and then NATO's potential role are part of those difficult discussions. In changes among allies and with regional partners, increase our awareness of situation dynamics and help us make informed decisions in collaboration with other international actors, which are both countries and the international organization. And this is essential as we will be increasingly called on to deal with crises, which respect no international borders, like COVID-19, climate-related disasters, cyber threats, and terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. These crises have the potential to either fuel conflict, exacerbate existing threats, threatening food security, energy supplies, and economic development. And yes, also driving more people to migrate. And on the climate front, NATO is doing more to fully understand and integrate climate change into all aspects of our work, from military planning to equipment to how we exercise and train our armed forces. No single country, not even the biggest, can deal with such challenges by itself. So we need to work together to find common solutions to protect our people and the rules-based order. A strong military and political alliance is essential, but is not enough. We also need strong societies, able to prevent, endure, adapt, and bounce back from a broader range of physical and virtual threats. That's why NATO allies have agreed to strengthen our resilience requirements at the NATO summit this year, in areas including the continuity of government, secure transport and communication, including G5, energy, food, water supplies. We are working closer with partners, the private sector, civil societies, and academia on these matters, because ultimately, although resilience is a national responsibility, it is also a collective effort. We're only as strong as our weakest link. Now, to answer the second part of your question, how does this affect NATO's approach to the Middle East and North Africa? Let me call it MENA from now on, so it will be easier.
So Giovanni, just before you go, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just make sure my math is right. So on the top three priorities, you said strong defense, political cohesion, and then resilient societies. Did I get that right?
Well, it's when I was talking about the three priorities, I was mentioning actually there were different three. But yes, you touch on very important points with
Right.
which definitely say, if you like spell out what we're trying to tackle. I would say that
Fair enough. Okay.
you are on target. Yes.
All right.
So. Well, I was now tackling the second part of your question, which was specific about MENA. So, as probably and most people might know, we have two security frameworks. They're called the Mediterranean Dialogue and Istanbul Cooperation Initiative, and they are 27 and 17 years old, with a number of countries in Middle East and North Africa. These frameworks have been key to enhancing our understanding of the security environments and also addressing challenges collectively together with these partners. They are unique fora in which NATO allies and Mediterranean Gulf partners can meet and candidly discuss security issues of common concern. A lot has changed in the last 27 years, but the basic of these frameworks remain valid. Above all, the notion that the transatlantic security cannot be divorced from security in the Mediterranean and the Gulf. And we believe we are safer when our neighbors too are more secure. And we know that we share many security threats with our partners in the region. It is actually the basis of NATO's third core task, which is collective security. Therefore, I can safely say that the Middle East and North Africa remains one of the priorities of political and military. And the efforts of individual allies and NATO are on par with their level of ambition. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. You did. Obviously, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into every single one of those mechanisms that you guys use to engage the region, and specifically on a number of countries, including Libya and the Gulf, since you mentioned the Gulf itself. Let me ask one more broad question, which is going to be difficult for you, but I encourage you to be as frank and candid as possible. So the United States' relationship with NATO during the Trump administration, let's just say, to put it mildly, was uncertain. Okay, and now we have a new team in Washington. Tell us what kind of changes, concrete changes, at least in policy, have you seen already with the Biden administration regarding its approach and relationship with NATO? And if it's the same, by all means, tell me it's the same.
I can see how, from a Washington DC perspective, this question would come from you. So,
well, you know who's going to come. So there you go.
The presidency of Donald Trump was quite eventful, to say, for NATO. So there were frank statements that came from the White House, and we had to adapt to this reality. However, those years, also thanks to the U.S. pressure, were also marked with the demonstrable increase in allies' defense spending. As you know, there was a big push from the Trump administration about defense spending. And a lot of allies have now reached the target of 2% of the GDP, which actually is the baseline that had been agreed in Riga at the Riga summit in 2006. So some allies are actually above the level of 2% of commitment. And many have reached that point during the term of the Trump administration. So the election of President Biden, nonetheless, does mark the start of a new chapter of our transatlantic alliance. And NATO, with the US, is focusing on rebuilding alliance and strengthening our bonds to address the wide range of challenges that we face, from international terrorists to deal with more assertive Russia and the implications of China's rise on our security. So in some, there's a lot to address, and with the new U.S. administration, which actually has shown its complete willingness to work with NATO on such issues. And there is momentum to work together on climate change, for instance, with President Biden being a keen advocate for such a focus. These frank and re-energized changes among allies can only strengthen the NATO's work to set clearer objectives and collectively provide the necessary means to address traditional and emerging threats. So when NATO is stimulated and challenged, something good comes out of the process. So I think that that was also the result of 4 years of Trump administration, which were challenging years, but I think at the end NATO came out of it even stronger.
Well, there was a silver lining, I guess. Okay, thank you for that candid view. Let's talk about the Afghanistan pullout, Giovanni. Was NATO in any way surprised by that? Obviously, there were some concerns, just like there were here in Washington, about the pullout and about the likely consequences of that pullout. What are the views and concerns shared in Brussels about that? And equally important, what is the organization doing to address those concerns moving forward?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to underline, as you kind of mentioned, that we're not talking about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, but the full withdrawal of NATO forces, because the U.S. and other allies went into Afghanistan together to prevent the country from serving as a safe haven for terrorists. And over the past two decades, no terrorist attack against NATO countries have been organized from Afghanistan. The international community, supported by a military presence, engaged in nation building, political reforms, helping to create the conditions for Afghans to make significant social and economic progress that will not be easy to reverse, notwithstanding the situation. It's understandable that concerns over our departure from Afghanistan and consequences will continue to be debated and critiqued. For those of us who supported Afghanistan and have been there a couple of times, the events of the recent months have been heartbreaking and a tragedy for the Afghan people. In August, NATO allies organized one of the largest airlifts in history from Kabul airport, with over 120,000 people evacuated under extremely difficult and dangerous circumstances. And together with the rest of the international community, we must continue our efforts to bring others to safety. Not everything was done perfectly. Despite our investment and the sacrifices made over 2 decades, no ally anticipated the speed with which the Afghan government and forces collapsed. Clearly, they needed to evaluate our work, mission objectives in Afghanistan, and learn from our shortcomings is a must. As the Secretary General announced publicly since the fall of the country to the Taliban, we will conduct an honest, clear-eyed assessment on NATO's engagement, looking at what worked and also what did not work. Although NATO led the military efforts in Afghanistan, it will also be incumbent on other national and international actors, including the EU, the UN, to reassess their work in Afghanistan if we are to ensure similar scenarios do not occur again. And our shortcomings should not, however, completely overshadow the gains achieved over the last 20 years. We have prevented terrorist attacks emanating from Afghanistan, from striking allied territories, and through our military presence, enable the international community to operate and create the conditions for significant social and economic process. As we weigh the findings of our assessment and lesson learned, one thing remains unchanged: Afghanistan notwithstanding, allies across both sides of the Atlantic will continue to stand together, and this has not been affected.
Okay, you mentioned the strategic concept, the new strategic concept of NATO, which right now you guys are finalizing, is in full swing. And that should be ready by the next summit. So when is the next summit again? Remind me.
At the end of June.
End of June. Okay. So as you guys are finalizing that very important document, tell me how much Middle East is in there. How much language is there on that region? And what kind of changes do you see in your approach towards the region?
Yeah, It is like a bit early to say because we are in the early stage of redrafting the strategic concept. It is. Let me first explain what it is about, because the strategic concept is really a key document for the alliance, and it contains NATO's values, purposes, tasks, provides a collective assessment of the security environment, and drives our strategic adaptation towards 2030 and beyond. Politically, it is only second to the Washington Treaty in terms of importance.
Mm-hmm.
So NATO's current strategic concept was agreed in 2010. It was a pre-invasion of Crimea, pre-Afghanistan, pre a number of things, pre-COVID. It has served NATO well. And the new NATO concept will build on those elements that are still valid and relevant. Strategic competition, however, is rising. Looking to the future, we will have to prepare for a different, more competitive and a stable world. And this process will give us the opportunity to underscore our unity and recommit to our values. It will take into account NATO's military and political adaptation since 2014 and recognizes new realities such as rise of China and as well as emerging and disruptive technologies and the impact of climate change on our security. So to answer your question about the process, this month we have started internal consultation with allies on NATO's evolving strategic environment, approach, priorities. We will also convene seminars to bring together NATO leadership, official and experts communities. And strengthening our cooperation with NATO partners underpins many of the strands of work we will consider in the strategic concept. We are therefore looking at options to engage partners, including Middle East, North Africa partners in this process, as well as international organizations and expert communities, youth, civil society, and the private sector. For Middle East and North Africa, our relationship with partners in that region, the concept should be a useful guide on how NATO understands and sees the security environment going forward, and what NATO's key priorities will be for cooperative security. Working together in the global coalition against Daesh, we ended the terrorist control over large swaths of territory in Iraq and Syria. We'll continue to support Iraq to ensure Daesh does not return. In Tunisia, we help train special forces. In Jordan, we work with to counter improvised explosive devices and many other areas. And the deteriorating situation in Sahel also matters to NATO. To NATO's collective security in general. And we will enhance our engagement with Mauritania, also the G5 Sahel, and we'll remain open upon request to consider further engagement in the region. So this is another area that we will address with more emphasis. There is a lot more to do, and the NATO 2030 agenda highlights the importance of stepping up our training, capacity building effort with our MENA partners, so that this is what we will do, and that there is a lot of work ahead of us. But as I said, impossible for me to actually explain how much Middle East, North Africa related matters will be contained in a new strategic concept, as you know, the work to rewrite it has actually just started.
Giovanni, help me better understand, because I'm personally curious. Help me better understand a little bit more about the process of drafting this document. Does it happen at a ministerial level or heads of state level, or what? What kind of committees are formed to come up with this document? And does it happen by consensus or what?
Well, ultimately, all decisions are taken by consensus. So the idea is to tackle the various parts of the strategic concept in phases, with meetings which are also at the level of ambassadors. But basically, there is a drafting team that, based on the seminars I was talking about, consultation with partners, and of course, you know, a meeting with allies, will come out with a text that ultimately will need to be approved by the North Atlantic Council. And the North Atlantic Council actually takes decisions at various levels: heads of state and government, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Defense, or ambassadors, which are permanently here in Brussels. But all these decisions have the same validity because there are still North-Atlantic Council decisions. So that is the way it's going to be played. Of course, a number of colleagues are engaged in this effort, and we will also do our part, for example, regarding the consultation with the Middle East and North Africa partners.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm asking you, Giovanni, is because I'm trying to see if this construct or mechanism that you guys use could be useful or serve as inspiration for the Gulf Cooperation Council, recognizing it's not an alliance, right? But obviously they share a lot in common. They're partners in many ways, despite their political differences every now and then. And I'm just wondering whether that construct that you guys have could be useful for them to use as a process to solidify their bilateral relations, but also try to create something that's a little bit more collective. But anyway, let's just keep that as a side for later. Okay, so the next question I have is about the very changing dynamics of the region and the multiplicity of actors now getting involved in it, and the rising powers, also regional powers, that are playing much more active roles on not just the regional stage, but international stage. And of course, the Chinese coming in and the Russians coming in also, and deepening or in solidifying their presence in the Mediterranean, which is not that far from NATO's southern flank, actually. So very different Middle East, much more busy Middle East, more powers getting involved. Does NATO see this as a source of anxiety, or is there an opportunity there? How is NATO adjusting to this new reality, which is a Middle East that is not what it used to be before, with US preeminence, and then the rest now all of a sudden is the US sort of like disengaging, and then regional powers stepping up, but also new powers coming in, new relatively speaking, I would say, obviously, with the Chinese relying a lot on oil imports from the region, and the Russians now having a base in Syria and getting involved in so many files in the region. So how is NATO adjusting to this new Middle East, let's just say?
Yeah, what this is like the question of the questions.
It is a question wrapped in several.
So in the past 20 years, NATO has been quite involved in the Middle East, and continues to be present through programs and training activities throughout the region. And we have, as discussed before, like framework programs for partnership. So we are in constant consultation with a number of nations. So let's take the Mediterranean dialogue, for example. It's a framework of 7 countries, pretty unique, because a framework in which 30 NATO allies, Israel, and 6 Arab countries meet regularly. So, for example, we had a recent meeting to discuss the lesson learned on COVID-19, which was actually very interesting. And so we use these frameworks to improve mutual understanding, including through the diplomacy efforts, and foster a dialogue that otherwise might not even exist, as well as discuss security challenges and how we can provide greater safety to our people and even to our partners. So I think NATO remains a credible actor in the region beyond specific activities which might seem like detail, such as education and training, CBRN, defense, cybersecurity, maritime security. And actually, we have increased our consultation on security issues of common concern, as well as practical cooperation with our partners in the Middle East. And yes, we do see how other actors are more and more present, including China, Russia. We monitor those actions closely to assess how they can impact alliance security. But make me kind of underline how NATO does not consider China as an adversary, and we aim to maintain a constructive dialogue where possible. It's that China's influence and international policies can present challenges, and we need to address these challenges as an alliance. This is why we will continue to monitor their actions in the Middle East, as ensure they monitor ours. What I can say about allies consensus, because actually everything NATO does has to be agreed by consensus, is that they have all agreed to an ambitious MENA strategy, which actually I'm in charge of implementing, In addition to our two frameworks, Mediterranean Dialogue and the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative, we also are, I would argue, heavily engaged in Iraq. And we have constructive exchanges with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Sultanate of Oman. And also we are discussing our future approach to the Sahel. So as you can see, there are things that are moving, and all allies recognize the need to support our partners and our role in the Middle East as a matter of principle. But regional dynamics are very complex, and achieving consensus requires a time-consuming deliberative process, and very often maybe you don't see the alliance taking decisions of huge magnitude, because at the end of the day, all 30 allies need to agree on a certain position, and this is challenging, and there are very different positions at times that need to be reconciliated, but these are the dynamics of the alliance. And but what I can say is that once a decision is taken, it's very strong. All 30 nations are behind it, and they're all committed to implementing it.
Okay, you mentioned some exchanges with Saudi Arabia, so I'll get back to that in a minute because I'm actually very interested in that. But you also mentioned Iraq. So NATO has a training mission in Iraq, capacity building mission in Iraq, and not too long ago, in February of this year, you expanded that mission, which is great news, frankly, for not just the alliance, but also for the United States and for just stability in that country. I think you guys do tremendous work there, and you're taking the lead on such a vital matter that would be so important for the future of the country. So tell me a little bit more about the expansion itself, like a little bit more details. Why did you feel the need to expand it? Recognizing that it is important, of course, but I want to know a little bit more from you. And then just on the question of challenges, tell me what some of the challenges that you still face in Iraq. I'm assuming they're not that different from the challenges that we face in Iraq, the United States, but I'd like to hear from you as well.
Well, first of all, let me underline how the NATO mission in Iraq, which is the cornerstone of NATO's engagement in the Middle East, of course, is a non-combat advisory, training, and capacity building mission. So the mission supports Iraq in strengthening security institutions and forces so that they themselves are able to stabilize their country, fight terrorism in all forms and manifestation, and prevent the return of Daesh. And our mission is at the request and consent of the Iraqi government. It's carried out with full respect of Iraqi sovereignty and territorial integrity, in full consultation with the Iraqi authorities, and as part of a comprehensive approach together with the global coalition and other key partners, including the UN and the European Union. Now, in February, NATO decided to further expand the NATO mission, as you were mentioning, following a request by the Iraqi government. This will be incremental upon Iraqi request. And the political environment in Iraq remains challenges, though, as also the low turnout in the recent election have shown. And the current Iraqi government is positive about the NATO mission in Iraq, and we will continue our dialogue with them about any further expansion of the mission. So that is where we stand about.
Well, I'm not going to leave you there. So I need to know a little bit more because I'm very interested myself. This is a main line of effort as far as the research of my program at MEI, and I'm personally invested in this space, obviously, and I had some oversight responsibilities for it when I was in the Pentagon. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the areas that you guys are working on as far as defense institutional capacity building. So is it more about how do you help them with strategy and policy making, or is it human resource management, defense management, logistics? What are some of the areas that NATO is working on in Iraq?
It is actually advice, training, capacity building, and I cannot give you exact details about this. What I can tell you is that it is built around the requests of the Iraqi government. So basically, whatever they want for us to expand on, we will invest to make sure this happens. And we're talking about also a pretty important expansion, because we're going from hundreds to thousands here. So it's an important investment also from NATO allies, but it has to be gradual. It has to be also based on the situation on the ground, but most and foremost has to be based on what the Iraqis will request from us.
Are you aware which institutions you're working with, or is it everybody? Is it the police? Is it also the counterterrorism service? Certain combat formations? Are you aware of which partners you're working with in Iraq?
Well, first and foremost is Ministry of Defense. There's more than that, but I can't expand on details.
Okay, fair enough. Now that you have decided to invest in a big way in Iraq in this space, and you recognize how important that kind of work is for not just the security of the country, but also for regional security, did you see any opportunities elsewhere where you can do that kind of work, whether it's in the Levant or in the Gulf or just any other place where you guys are thinking of expanding that mission?
Yeah, the principle is that we engage when there is added value for both partners, for both parties, for NATO and for the partner, and above all, it has to be on an interest-driven, demand-driven basis.
Sure.
So we won't go anywhere unless we're of course asked by the local government. So we already engaged in a great number of capacity building efforts, notably in the Middle East and North Africa, Iraq, Jordan, and Tunisia are the three countries that more than anyone else benefit from this. So it's so-called DCB, Defense Capacity Building. It's like a NATO term. So DCB helps partners improve defense and related security capacities, their resilience, and so it contributes also to the security of the alliance by improving the resilience of the partners. And it can include various types of supports, from strategic advice on defense and security sector reform and institution building, development of local forces through education and training, advice and assistance in specialized areas such as logistics and cyber defense. So I'm giving you this answer not only about Iraq, but in general also about Tunisia and Jordan. The initiative is demand-driven, tailored to the needs of the recipient nations, and it builds on NATO's extended track record of advising, assisting, training, and mentoring countries that require defense and related security capacity building support. NATO has a unique defense expertise to provide and coordinate practical specialized support from a number of allies. So, we're making progress on these DCB packages. I mentioned Jordan, Tunisia, Iraq, but also Moldova, Georgia. And more recently, the NATO Foreign Ministers have also endorsed a DCP package for the UN peacekeeping training. In Iraq, maybe I can give you a little more details since you were asking about specific areas. So it's not so much, I'm just going to mention some activities that we're doing there. Yep. So support to armed forces in counter ID, counter improvised explosive device, EOD, explosive ordnance disposal and demining, civil military planning support to operation, reform of the Iraqi security institutions, technical training on the maintenance of Soviet area armored vehicles, military medicine and medical assistance. We actually are trying to expand more and more on these two fields. Advice on security sector reforms, CivMil planning support to operations. And so we go from workshops to train-the-trainer courses to senior leader seminars on counter ID and also good governance of the defense sector. In Jordan, the DCB package currently focuses on information protection, cyber defense, military exercises, counter-ID, personnel management, logistics, civil preparedness, and crisis management. We actually helped them build their crisis management center that they heavily used to tackle the COVID-19 crisis. Border security as well. The allies also agreed to enhance the counterterrorism dimension of the DCP package with the inclusion of counterterrorism training and education, small arms and light weapons, strategic communication, and countering the terrorist misuse of the internet. And the other Middle East and North Africa country which benefits from DCB is Tunisia, where we provide support in cyber defense, counter-ID, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense, but also promoting transparency in resource management, fostering interoperability with Nato, and good governance. They very much like our good governance program in Tunisia.
I know that in Iraq, the Americans are folded into the NATO mission. So we contribute to that as far as the capacity building mission. But in Jordan, obviously, we have our separate training program there. Is there a close consultation between NATO and the US, at least in Jordan?
There is close consultation, and actually, it's not that everything the US does by itself in Jordan. There's also like a contribution to what NATO does in Jordan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank my team members, Cinzia, who's actually Italian, just recently joined the team here, but also Saskia, for helping me with this question, because I have no expertise whatsoever on Greece and Turkey. So the question is, as tensions between Greece, France, and Turkey show a slight de-escalation, should we expect a boost to Operation Sea Guardian in the Mediterranean? And can NATO build on this between its member states? And if so, how?
So Operation Sea Guardian is a maritime, as you said, operation in the Med. And is built to be flexible, to potentially cover the full range of NATO's maritime security operation tasks. To understand where we are with the Sea Guardian and dynamics between allies on this, as well on the position of the alliance, I had to provide a little bit of context.
Sure.
So allies have given 3 basic and critical tasks to Operation Sea Guardian. So the first is support maritime situational awareness. It's about enhancing information sharing between allies and with civilian agencies to compile what we call the NATO recognized maritime picture. So basically, it's having an understanding of what is at sea, basically, which ships are at sea. The second is to support maritime counterterrorism. And this entails planning and conducting a wide range of operations to deter, disrupt, defend, protect against maritime-based terrorist activities. In a nutshell, these operations aim to deny terrorists access to designated areas and contain threats, including the use of force if necessary. And the third is to contribute to maritime security capacity building. This means contributing to development of maritime security with both military and non-military authorities, including our Middle East and North Africa partners. So, and these are the 3 tasks that the North Atlantic Council has given to Operation Sea Guardian. There are 4 additional, which could eventually be also included in the in OSG tasks. And they are to uphold the freedom of navigation, conduct maritime interdiction, fight the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and protect critical infrastructure. But for the moment, all the first 3 I mentioned are actually part of the task of Sea Guardian. At the moment, I don't think there's any upcoming modification of the mission. And to address your question, yes, there have been tensions between NATO allies in the Mediterranean a few months ago. they can happen, disagreements as well. They have different positions versus the various crises that affect particularly the southern rim countries in the Mediterranean. But actually NATO is a forum to discuss these matters. It's a forum to diffuse these tensions. And actually we have also implemented mechanisms to facilitate countries that had this kind of difficulties to actually come together in a NATO environment, express their respective position and trying to find a way to mediate and actually help find a solution that is win-win.
I told you I was going to come back to the consultations you're having with Saudi Arabia, but let me ask this in a broader question. Is there any conversation going on in the organization about a bigger role for NATO in the Gulf? Anybody you think is working on joining the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative that you mentioned before? I know that the Omanis and the Saudis might be thinking about that. So do you have any information on that? So
first of all, NATO has a significant engagement in the Gulf. And that's why we launched this initiative, which has been going on for 17 years now. The ICI, Istanbul Cooperation Initiative, so-called because it was launched at the Istanbul Summit, it was actually open to the 6 countries of the GCC. Mm-hmm. 4 of them signed up for the initiative. They are Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. Yep. And 2 did not. So Saudi Arabia and Oman are not part of the ICI framework. However, it's not that we do not have exchanges with them. And for example, we have one-of-a-kind presence in Kuwait, which is the NATO ICI Regional Center. It's a center where we have also NATO personnel. The center is open to the 6 countries of the GCC. And actually, Saudi Arabia and Oman participate to the activities of the center, even though they are not part of the ICI. And the center is, the name of the center is NATO ICI Regional Center.
What does the center do, Giovanni? What are the activities that you just described?
Yeah, the center essentially is a center that delivers training, individual training, but they also facilitate the NATO's political dialogue. So to give you an example, the center hosted at the end of 2019, the 15th anniversary of the ICI with the Secretary General, the Deputy Secretary General, all the Council being in Kuwait. And that meeting actually was held together with all 6 GCC countries and also the Secretary General of the GCC. So to tell you how a center in Kuwait can actually facilitate political dialogue. It also facilitates our outreach to the Gulf countries because they actually come under a NATO umbrella when they come to the center. And it's also a good instrument for public diplomacy. But I would say that the primary function is training. It's a center that delivers courses and delivers NATO courses in the Gulf. So that I think is a good testimony of the engagement of NATO in the Gulf. Of course, there's more that can be done. And also the activity of the center has been affected by the pandemic, and now they just restarted delivering resident courses. But before it stopped its activity, practical, and started going virtual, we had trained over 1,000 people, for example. We're talking about only a couple of years because the center was inaugurated only in 2017. So it's we're happy about the progress and the way this collaboration, which is like NATO Kuwait collaboration, but with the involvement of all 6 GCC countries, is going, and the outreach that the center is actually enabling from a NATO perspective. We also have a number of discussions on maritime security with our ICI partners, and as you probably know, several allies have military installations in those countries, and Kuwait has been instrumental in many aspects concerning the facilitation of NATO's operational mission. Gulf partners have been absolutely essential during the evacuation out of Kabul airport. I spent a couple of nights discussing with them how to deploy our people and actually facilitate the withdrawal from Kabul. So less than 2 months ago. So we're very grateful for their support to this operation. But this shows how building bridges and establishing partnership with these countries, actually when the time of need comes, they are responsive, and together with NATO, we've been doing very important things, and certainly they've been key to our in supporting us evacuate the 120,000 people we were talking about before. So we intend to deepen these ties with certainly with the 4 ICI countries, but I think there's potential also for Oman and Saudi Arabia to do more with.
Okay. We got 8 more minutes, Giovanni. So depending on how you answer the second one, we'll either just leave it at that question or I'll ask you another one. We can't have a NATO conversation, obviously, without discussing Libya, which is an important country for you guys, given the geographical proximity, at least. I'm going to warn you, I'm not an expert on Libya. So this question is from colleagues of mine who focus on North Africa and Libya in particular. Holding Libyan elections at the end of this year is, I'm just going to read it, is depicted as the best opportunity for peace in a decade. Despite the unfolding political crisis and the remaining foreign troops on Libyan soil, key NATO members therefore keep pushing to go ahead with the elections. They might nonetheless have differences regarding preferred candidates and parties in Libya. Could you provide some insights on the dynamics between the NATO members most actively involved, and is there any NATO-wide contingency planning going on for the unfolding of a less ideal scenario than peaceful elections followed by stability? It's a loaded question, a big one, but I know you guys are tracking Libya. I know there's a lot of thinking going on in Libya. So just share with us a little bit what your thinking is on that important country.
Yeah, it's a file that takes a lot of my time, as you can imagine. So
yep.
We talked about Afghanistan previously and how sensitive this topic is among allies. So this is very sensitive as well, because there are very different views and opinions on the Libya situation, from the perspective of individual allies. But this is actually what NATO consultation is about. So NATO is the place where allies can discuss disagreements and express their differences, and we do have frank discussions about Libya for sure. So I can't really talk about the specifics of these debates, and as I'm sure you understand, and surely it's not my place to comment on the elections, on the candidates or the way the direction which they should go. But we are in NATO. We all recognize that basically, first of all, the NATO can be the forum to discuss these challenging topics among allies in the spirit of mutual respect, even when positions are different. And also specific about Libya, at the last summit, which was held in Brussels in June 2021, the allies clearly stated that the crisis in Libya has the direct implication for the regional stability and the security of all allies. And this gives you a sense of the relevance of this dossier within NATO. Now, actually, if you look at the declaration of the previous summit, which was 2018, you will see that actually there was language about the potential NATO support, which had already been decided in a couple of key areas. But it was all conditioned to the security situation and the security and political situation, which eventually actually was not conducive to NATO support. So it did not materialize due to the volatile political dynamics in Libya. So now NATO has welcomed the progress achieved in Libya. We have a government of national unity. We have a presidency council. NATO has also commended the efforts of the United Nations in support of a Libyan-owned and Libyan-led political process, aimed at promoting national reconciliation as well as unifying and strengthening state institutions. And I would also add a leadership role of some NATO allies that actually put their political weight into a process to try to put things on the right track. Let me mention certainly Germany, with the Berlin process. Now, of course, political support to individual partners or candidates is not something NATO can discuss, as I'm sure you know, but dynamics between allies and Libyan stakeholders are a topic of discussion, and in a NATO forum. So we actually have this kind of engagements. So if I can sum up, here in NATO we're currently in an observation mode, calling on the relevant parties to make the necessary preparation for these elections, which we hope are going to be held on the 24th of December 2021. For them to be free, fair, inclusive, and both presidential and parliamentary elections. This is what you will see also in the summit decisions, and also we are in constant coordination with the United Nations, and also in support of the UN Security Council resolutions. So we also are every day trying to better understand the situation on the ground, and so all this is ongoing. Actually, my team is fully involved in making sure we have a clear situational awareness about the Libyan situation. So hopefully, we will have very soon elected government that they might open actually a number of perspective for the international community to engage in support of Libya.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you gave me 2 minutes. So I'm going to fire a really quick one here before we wrap up, Giovanni. I'm going to go back to that strategic concept document because in many ways it's going to define your role over the next few months. It's a key document. And as you very well know, we're right in the middle of forming similar documents in the United States, whether it's a new national security strategy, a national defense strategy, a global force posture review. So we're right in the thick of things as well. And then in many ways, those documents are informed the way I'd like to see it by two things, like opportunity and threats, right? So what are your opportunities? What are your threats? Let me hone in on the threat issue for NATO, okay? What are the top threats that NATO is facing right now from the Middle East? Is it terrorism? Is it migration and refugees? Or is it a war with Iran? Or is it all of the above? What are the top threats that you're facing that you're going to be seeing in that strategic concept?
Yeah. As I said, I can't anticipate what's going to be in the strategic concept. I can tell you how I will contribute to this, from a personal point of view for the moment, and because we're going to have a number of seminars and debates and everything else. So if I look at the Middle East and North Africa, since there are essentially two main areas that the NATO needs to tackle. One is strategic competition, and here we're talking about a peer competitor, and the second one is terrorism. Yep. There are other things that you mentioned, like migration and so on and so forth. Yeah, certainly. But if I would have to identify the top ones, there are these two: strategic competition and terrorism. So these are the two things we need to tackle. Now, when we talk about strategic competition, we talk about mostly deterrence and defense, and the NATO posture to make sure that we are able to deter the adversary and make sure that we can defend against an attack. When we talk about terrorism, from a NATO perspective, and when we look at the Middle East and North Africa, it's mostly about tackling this threat together with our partners, because our partners actually have the same challenges, and we are in a cooperative security environment. So I will see counterterrorism. I will hope to see the new strategic concept like focusing on counterterrorism through the lenses of what can we do together with our partners. And I think that will be absolutely key.
Okay. Well, my friend, the interrogation is over. But I very much would like to thank you for coming in, and let me just offer you the final word if you have anything else to say.
No, it's been very interesting. Thank you for this opportunity, actually, to collaborate with you and to engage with your audience. I very much appreciate that, and I hope we're going to have other opportunities, possibly in person. That would be great.
Oh, that would be really nice. Okay, well, thanks a lot for coming in. Good luck with everything, and we'll